The history of tiles in Portugal is a long one, but I will touch on the main aspects of it here. The techniques and patterns were brought to Portugal by the Moors, but what is unique about the Portuguese azulejo, the word used for tile, which means polished stone, is the vast use of them to decorate streets, buildings, monuments and churches in Portuguese towns and cities. The Portuguese azulejo tiles were heavily influenced by Arab cultures, and traditional tiling decoration was followed, but in addition, the huge variety of blue decorated tiles was later influenced by the Dutch Delft style. The two main techniques and processes derived from Islamic tiles were majolica, or decoration on tin glaze, and puera seca. There was in addition one other process where raised lines on the tiles were made by pressing the soft clay over a fire tile where the raised lines had been carved into the clay surface. After bisque firing, coloured glazes filled the areas between the raised lines. However, the majolica style seems to predominate. They are either all blue or all polychrome or a mixture of both. From the 14th century, tile panels, as I said before, decorated the streets, buildings, monuments, palaces and churches of Portuguese cities. They are not just decorative, but they usually tell a story and chronicle major cultural aspects of Portuguese history. Traditionally, the azulejo told stories of Portuguese navigators and their voyages around the world, and churches also used the azulejo to tell stories about saints, and classic stories were also depicted. The azulejo tradition continues to this day and are commonly displayed in Portuguese homes as well as train stations, restaurants, fountains, and so on. I am referring in this section basically to floor tiles, which were laid in churches, monastic establishments, palaces and homes of the wealthy during this period from about the 12th century. They required durable floors, able to withstand long wear, easy to clean, and flat enough for wooden furniture. Ceramic tiles were preferred to stone and marble because local craftsmen could produce them cheaper. I'll only refer to medieval tiling in the United Kingdom here, but similar practices are found in many other European countries. Clay was essentially terracotta. Sand and water was readily available, and most of the work took place in the warmer months. Tiles were handmade in wooden moulds, and potters had sufficient knowledge to make glazes containing lead oxide, which gave the tiles a durable, transparent gloss finish. Kilns were still quite primitive, consisting of brick structures held together with clay and designed to enable a wood fire to reach the desired temperature of about 1,000 degrees to fire the tiles to completion. Successful firings depended on the knowledge and experience of the tile masters to gauge the temperature of the kiln by the colour of the kiln atmosphere. Mosaic tiling was practiced extensively, in which tiles were made or cut to certain shapes and then assembled in interesting geometric patterns. The Cosmati pavement in Westminster Abbey is a superb example of this. But medieval tiles vary from those already discussed in these ways. There were several basic forms of decoration: relief or embossed, where the decoration was raised above the surface of the tile; line impressed decoration in a variety of patterns. The design was carved into the leather-hard clay tile, or a stamp was made with a wooden or metal design and its impression was stamped into the leather-hard clay surface. But the most significant innovation was the creation of inlaid or encaustic tiles. The pattern or figure on the surface of the tile is created by inlaying clay. They can just be one colour or several colours. They could be unglazed or glazed in a monochrome lead glaze. The wooden mould is placed over the relief design for the tile. Clay is then pressed into the mould and cut off with a wire hoop. And then scraped flat with its piece of wood. Taken from the mould, the design has been successfully impressed into the tile. That is, the impression is then filled with white slip clay, and after drying it is scraped off to reveal the finished decoration. Slip-decorated pottery was quite common during this period, so it stands to reason that tiles would be decorated in the same manner. Some extremely fine examples are these tiles from the parish church in Tring, Hertfordshire, in the United Kingdom. The decoration is explicated by the use of sgraffito, detailing and outlining the various aspects of the tile decoration. Probably the most noteworthy point to emphasize here is that it was during this time that tin glazing had reached its peak. First discovered by Islamic potters as early as the 8th century, the technique spread west and north by itinerant potters to Italy, through Spain and Portugal, and to Northern Europe. Most notable during this period was the heightening and pursuit of the perfection in artistic design and creativity, seen not just in tiles but in majolica ceramics as a whole, or maiolica being the Italian word for tin glazing. So it follows that the technique was to be extensively applied to the production of ceramic tiles. To revise the process for you, it means that after bisque firing, a lead glaze in which tin oxide has been added as an opacifying agent was applied to the tile by pouring or brushing. Then the decoration was painted on the unfired glazed surface using metallic oxides, which produced the main colours which are shown in this chart. Designs could be one colour or several colours called polychrome. Ornamentation was many and varied, such as floral and animal motifs, heraldic designs, male and female portraits, musical instruments and weapons, and so on. But let's not underestimate the skill and excellence of the ceramic artists of these times. Similar to the Perucci Palace floor, this amazing maiolica tiled floor of the Cappella Caracciolo del Sol in Naples exhibits a pattern of laying the tiles which consisted of a combination of pentagonal and square tiles. In contrast, we see the floor of the Siena Cathedral with its diamond-shaped tiles. You can imagine the need for considerable accuracy in size and shape required for this. These are beautiful figurative majolica tiles from the floor of Palazzo Marsili in Siena. And in conclusion, we can admire the beauty, the skill, the colours, and the assembly of this Baroque Rococo style majolica floor of the 16th century St. Michael's Church in Capri, Italy, depicting a Garden of Eden scene. The French term for tin glazing is faience, which derives from the northern Italian city of Faenza, once a major centre of majolica production in Italy. The influence and techniques of Italian majolica spread to France in the early part of the 16th century. Tile-making potteries were established in Lyon and Nevers, and this is a tile panel from a Nevers pottery. But the most notable works came from the workshop of Massio Albuquerque in Rouen in about 1526. Albuquerque specialised primarily in the fabrication of decorated tiles, and his style was based on Renaissance decorative motifs, as before mentioned. Probably his most recalled and remembered commission was to supply floor tiles for the Château d'Écouen, north of Paris, in the 1560s, built for the Grand Constable of France and de Montmorency. As well as floor tiles, he produced these magnificent wall tile panels, which are preserved in the Musée des Nationaux, also in Écouen. From the Middle Ages, the Dutch were making terracotta floor tiles, lead glazed or unglazed, which were also often decorated in the encaustic method as described earlier in the medieval section. By the end of the 16th century, the introduction of tin glazed tiles, brought in by Flemish potters, replaced these. There were several centres of production, but the most well-known was that at Delft. So the Dutch style of tin glazing became known as Delftware. But we see here the progression from floor tiles to the extensive use of tiles as decorative wall cladding and fireplace surrounds. Tiles were installed with lime plaster. They were colourful and easy to clean and very durable. On the left is another room in the Château de Grousset near Paris, and on the right a toilet in the Rosenberg Castle in Copenhagen. And here are two different fireplaces with 17th century Delft tile surrounds. Early designs resembled those from France and Antwerp, such as flower pots, grapes, and pomegranates. The tiles were either decorated solely in monochrome using cobalt or manganese, or polychrome, which was up to about 5 colours. From the beginning of the 17th century, designs changed dramatically after the import of Chinese Krak porcelain and the Chinese cobalt blue and white decoration was quickly adopted by the Dutch tile decorators. But Chinese design lasted for about 50 years, and then the Dutch tile painters turned to domestic subject matter such as Dutch costumes and customs, trades and occupations, buildings and landscapes, animals and birds, to name a few. Across the Channel in the British Isles, the story is much the same. As early as the beginning of the 17th century, Dutch potters had settled in Norwich and London and other areas and had brought with them the knowledge of the making of tin-glazed earthenware. The idea quickly caught on with English potters as the white surface enabled them to emulate the appearance and decoration of the Chinese porcelain that was already flooding into the country. The secret of hard-paste Chinese porcelain had not yet been solved. English Delftware, as it was called, was produced in several places, but tiles came mainly from Bristol, Liverpool, and the London potteries. Tiles were being produced, but the production was smaller than that in Holland, and Dutch tiles were being imported to meet the demands. The use of tiles was not as varied as it was in Holland, but they were mainly used in places needing hygienic wall cladding, such as kitchens and dairies, water closets, and for fireplace surrounds. Designs were usually taken from the English surroundings. Border decoration by sponged manganese was quite often used. And another distinctly different decoration on English Delftware tiles, which was done at the Bristol pottery, was called bianco sopra bianco, which is an Italian term for white on white. A white decoration in saturated tin oxide was applied to the usually lightly blued tin glaze surface of the tile to produce this special effect. Another interesting use for Delftware tiles was as pill tiles, which, because of their smooth and hygienic surface, were used by apothecarists to roll out pills. One of the most significant innovations in the production of tin-glazed tiles happened at this time. Transfer printing was already being done on English soft-paste porcelains, and in Liverpool, in the mid-1750s, John Sadler and Guy Green refined a process of transferring engraved images directly onto tiles using animal glue. This dramatically sped up the decoration process, making the tiles a huge commercial success. The detail of the images was also extremely fine, allowing for scenes of rustic and genteel life and fables, and later neoclassical designs and portraits of theatrical figures that appealed to the wealthier classes. The use of tiles in the making of wood-fired stoves cannot be excluded from this video. These stoves can be found in many palaces, castles and stately homes throughout Northern Europe, and they were being made as early as the late 15th century. They are exceptionally beautiful, and the tiles used were made in earthenware and decorated in a variety of techniques, including majolica, which we have already discussed at length. The body of the stove was usually brick and then faced with the tiles, and later on cast iron bodies were used. Now let's take a look at some of these. This magnificent stove in the Zinkovi castle exhibits heavily textured and colourful relief tiles. The tiled facing of this stove has absolutely amazing bas-relief sculptures, floral ornaments and grotesques. The stove on the left is in blue and white Delft tiles, and on the right manganese purple Delft tiles. Two stoves here from the Hohensalzburg fortress in Austria. Numerous relief friezes in white on a rich, deep blue background. Here are two stoves by the German ceramist Hans Kraut. Stove making kept pace with all the main trends in art, from Gothic through the Renaissance to the Baroque, Biedermeier, and right through to Art Nouveau. And these two close-ups show the beautiful flowing Art Nouveau style on stoves during this period. And here are two more. And something different and quite spectacular, this stove by the French ceramist Alexandre Bigot. Most of our tile story has centered around Europe and the Middle East, but an important part of the whole story with which I will conclude this video is in relation to China. The story of tiles in China also begins as far back as probably the 2nd century AD, and similarly to the Egyptian culture, the construction and furnishing of tombs was an important part of the Chinese belief in the afterlife. Earthenware, glazed or unglazed tiles with low relief decoration became part of this practice. These Han Dynasty tiles are a good example of the type of tiles found in the early tombs. The architectural use of glazed tiles begins a little later in the Northern Wei dynasty, and by the 7th century, brilliantly coloured lead glazes in shades of green, amber and blue, which are often known as three-colour or Sankai glazes, were widely used for these purposes. Because of their artistic appearance and waterproof qualities, they were later in demand to adorn imperial palaces and gardens, mausoleums, temples and pagodas. The Fei Hong Pagoda in Shaanxi is the most well-preserved ancient glazed tile pagoda in China, and on the right is the magnificent roof of the imperial palace in the Liaoning province. The history of Chinese tiles is dominated from the Ming period by glazed roof tiles. Buildings were crowned with heavy tiled roofs. The main feature was the colour and the finely crafted and decorated objects which were used for roof capping, and highly ornamented tiles were made to close the gaps along the eaves. Chinese advanced technology in kiln firing and glazing meant that tiles became more highly fired to stoneware temperatures, and feldspathic glazes superseded lead glazes. So let's now take a look at some of these impressive tiles.